Presti, host of the Interviews for the University of Science and Philosophy. And today our guest is Terrence Howard. Terrence, how are you doing?
I'm doing really good, Matt. Thanks for the call.
Excellent. Well, I just wanted to conduct a short interview with you. Terrence Howard, many people know you as an actor, and you're doing very well on your show Empire. And basically what we wanted to cover here was Terrence Howard, the artist. And a lot of people may not know that you are into sculpting, that you have some work on display at the Visionary Art Museum in Baltimore, and also that for a lot of your life you've had influences from various illuminates, one being Walter Russell. So I just wanted to start off with a question about your childhood. What was your childhood like, and how did your artistic side unfold?
Well, I think my childhood was a little different from the average person's childhood in that I was found it hard to relate to a lot of people because I was a lot more conscious and aware of what was going on around me, what was going on inside of me, bigger questions that I wanted answers to. You know, I would ponder at 6 years old at why does a bubble take the shape of a ball, why not a square or a triangle, and spent most of my life answering that question. That led me into all these other things. My father, worked like most parents, but he was arrested when I was, for murder when I was 3 years old, and we were moved into the projects, and it was me and my three brothers, two younger brothers. One younger brother at the time, two younger brothers at the time, and my older brother Tyrone, who was only 4 at the time. And so we went from living in a middle-class neighborhood down to literally inside the project, and being of a lighter complected race, as far as being black, we were light-skinned, so we had a lot of trouble with the kids over there getting accepted in. But my love has always been towards, the sound and the voice that everything else makes, the things that who speak so loudly or so softly that we can't hear them, or maybe we're not listening hard enough.
Thank you for that, Terrence. Moving on. What do you recall as the beginning point of your artistic unfoldment as a young man?
My beginning of my art started with science experiments. I was so worried about the plants in my mother's front yard, and I wanted to remove the dirt. I was trying to clean her plants or flowers, and what cleans better than bleach and and Dawn dishwasher liquid. So I mixed up a concoction and poured that all over her plants. And she had spent all spring and summer getting ready, and that was my artistic expression of building, trying to, clean some plants. My expressions of art has always been associated with science and making science work more than anything else. But, around 4 years old, that was the beginning of those scientific experiments.
That's interesting. So moving on into your teen years, did you do anything like enter science fair contests or any of that?
Yeah, I remember 13 years old making a volcano.
Huh.
But I did a much better job at sculpting the volcano than, pouring some baking soda in there, hoping there was going to be a reaction, and the reaction was white instead of red, and all of the things that you really want to occur. But as far as I took some joint compound, and, my dad was a contractor, so I took the joint compound and I made the mountain with it and the townscape, the landscape, so to speak. And that was, entered that fair. I was 13. I didn't go too far with that.
Right.
My ideas hadn't really matured yet.
That's interesting. What do you recall most in your teen years as far as when did you began to notice that you were beginning to sculpt and that you were, as far as you said, entering the science fair. But when did you really begin to unfold your talent with sculpting? Did that come in the teenage years, or was that something that came later on in life?
No, that didn't. That wasn't something that came until I was 40. Till I was about 40, 41, 45 now. My artistic expression had moved on to music, had moved on to writing, to poetry, to painting, and things of that nature. And I hadn't come back to sculpting because I always wanted to wanted to sculpt stone. So I did some masonry work, but it really wasn't until around 41 that I had this overwhelming need to seek a deeper understanding. I had a dream when I was 16, and I'd always had these conscious dreams. I call them being consciously involved with your psychosis, to where you wake up in the middle of something occurs in your dream and you recognize you're dreaming, and you recognize that you can control everything in it because it's all taking place in your head anyway. So it's like a big daydream. And I saw sculpture or an existence of an interplay of cavitation, bubbles. But the bubbles were crystalline, and their interaction was like a nebula, but it was very precise.
Wow.
There was no chaos associated with it, as if each bubble or cavitation gave birth to the next bubble and crystallized, and it had always been there, but I was watching it form. And I woke up, and there was no material out there like that. And to describe my dream, the closest thing I had seen to it was the Fortress of Solitude in Superman, but this was nothing like that beyond these intersecting planes or lines. But what I was looking at was a multi-dimensional planes, but a trans-dimensional link to them. And, we weren't taught sacred geometry or any of that in school. I didn't come across sacred geometry until I was 41 years old, and began to see the reality and the relationship between the things I dreamed and the things that I needed to create. But in order to create it, I needed to understand the nature of the universe, of what is the base shape and material within the universe. And I'd always heard about there being three sides to everything, the magic three number. So I went about looking to divide the universe into threes, which, it never comes out with anything of any balance. You try to use music to divide the universe up, but at 440 hertz, that didn't work out. And I didn't know anything about, solfeggine scales at the time. But as I went along and started learning about solfeggine scales and, that there's different frequencies by which the universe is broken out, it led me to a man named John Keeley, his work. And he was an inventor, a visionary, I would call him, whose ideas rivaled Walter Russell, which I didn't come across until later on in my study of John Keeley and Universal Secrets Never Before Revealed, and watching his sympathetic vibrations and his understanding of it. But he never went into detail as to how the things work. He just gave a broad overview, and Dale Pons had written this book about him. But Dale was still speaking, from a third or fourth person perspective in comparison to the man's work. And then I was watching a video on YouTube that Dale Pons was giving an oration describing some of John Keeley's work. And there's someone in the audience that mentioned, have you taken the time, have you looked at Walter Russell's work and seen if there was a relationship in there? And Dale admitted that he hadn't seen Walter Russell's work, but he had heard about, the work that Walter did. And this is years after Walter had died. I think the video was in the 70s or 80s that they were doing. But
Mm-hmm.
I started looking up Walter Russell, and I ordered a new concept of the universe.
Mm-hmm.
And it touched on a number of things, but the best thing that hit me was the cube sphere that he spoke about and how the universe behaves, that is true shape of the universe, or motion within the universe, that cube sphere. And that's what ultimately made the final puzzle piece to my sculpting work, because I knew I needed 4 equal forces to create any one real thing in the universe, at least at the simplest basis. Simplest means of depicting or understanding any dimension is by looking at it as with 4 crossing inertial planes. And we see a tetrahedron form in that. But learning the relationships between that began the need to expand my sculpting work. And I ended up moving to glass, moving to, acrylics and acetate, to describe some of these works. But that was sort of the walk towards that.
Well, certainly your sculpting and sculptures and artwork are very impressive, as these pictures that are running with the video clearly show. Very authentic, very original, very unique. Well, based on what I'd heard from others, I always figured that the first book you had gotten by Walter Russell was The Universal One.
No, I bought a new concept of the universe, and when I finished, as I was getting through that, because I didn't realize it was just a treatise and, a treatment, so to speak, on a much larger thing. And then I bought The Universal One, and been reading that for the last 3.5 years now.
Mm-hmm.
About 3 years. Still have not finished it, because I really take my time and have gone back and gone back and gone back to understand, this new relationship between what the universe is really made of, that the universe is us, and the conscious relationships associated with that, and the new doctrine that he gave to the world, that's, slowly taking root in certain individuals' hearts. But his periodic table impressed me. That allowed me to start to see the relationships again. Before then, I'd been working on what really sparked a lot of this stuff was when I was 39, 40, I came up with an idea to where I wanted to create a guitar that when you press the key, the corresponding color would show up, and I was going to gather information from different people with synesthesia and develop a grid figured there was a relationship between the true colors, the colors that they saw, and the musical tones.
Mm-hmm.
And then found that there was no real empirical data that was out that I could use. So I went in search of finding ways of expressing that, which led me to John Keeley, who had made a chart about color and sound.
Mm-hmm.
But then Walter Russell took it a step further, and he put matter to color to sound by creating the periodic table, which allowed me to use other information to find the relationship between lightness, color, sound, and tone, and matter and its shape.
Mm-hmm.
And those things, the shapes of matter being the chemical properties, and without fully understanding the chemical properties, how they behave with each other, you don't fully understand what's happening with sound when it encounters other sound or comes in contact with something else, or color and that dimension of color, or the dimension of sound, or the dimension of chemical reaction.
Well, there's certainly no doubt that Walter Russell spearheaded a revolution in thinking. Unfortunately, it didn't catch on back in the 20s when he released the Universal One. And it's just an amazing feat that it's finally beginning to manifest itself in the hearts and minds of people, as you said, those out there who have the heart and are called to this kind of information. And wish to look into, new possible concepts of the universe and the way that it's structured chemically, geometrically, mathematically, and musically, and how the rhythmic balanced interchangings of waveforms occur. So I imagine, Terrence, that after reading a new concept of the universe that your curiosity was sparked, and so you moved to the Universal One. What was it that led you to choose the Universal One as your next book by Walter Russell?
Well, I had, there was still a number of answers that I didn't have, and I was looking at the course. I was looking to purchase the course, but I wasn't ready to spend the money for the course that follows a new concept of the universe. And I had purchased the Universal One before, but the Universal One, the very first half of it, he speaks more on the conscious evolution of man, what's necessary, and he goes back and debunks ideas about our senses and things from that perception, and his concept regarding mind and mind in motion, the mind interaction. That was a lot different for me, especially coming from a religious background. I was a Jehovah's Witness, or was studying as a Jehovah's Witness. So when you get to the ideas of meditation, those are things that's kind of shunned, as a witness, especially transcendental or emptying out your mind completely, but his ideas on mind and the one universal substance, it caused me to disabuse my mind of what things that I've been taught, but it's hard to let go of some of those things. But getting to the cause of matter, not the reaction of matter, but the actual cause of matter, which is really the study of dark matter before they had even been conceived. He was thoroughly discussing this current, this dark matter current that everything else rests upon.
Yeah, he refers to that as the still magnetic light of mind, or the one universal light, or the substance of mind itself. And of course, in Russellian science, there's no such thing as ether or necessarily dark matter, being that there's no particle substrate that creates the electrical motions. That all comes from the undivided, still sexless light of the mind of the creator. I wanted to ask you about your music and how you got into unfolding your musical talent. When did that begin for you?
Well, the music was the very first one. My mom used to sing all the time when she was pregnant with me, and I believe everyone becomes conscious inside the womb, but oftentimes since there's no common frame of reference once you're born, and make it out of the vaginal canal, the birth canal, because there's nothing to associate with the experience you've had for the last 4 conscious months while you were gestating in that, you kind of, you can't recall it. But for me, when I was born, they thought I had jaundice and some other issues in the way the welfare hospital dealt with, children at that time. They put me in a dark room and didn't have any light on me or kept me isolated for a great period of time. And I believe that trauma of being isolated from that warm, loving feeling I had felt in the womb caused me to recall being inside the womb. And the music of my mother singing, that I used to watch her mouth when I got the opportunity, when I was finally reunited with her. And she would sing, and I remember the moment of recognizing that's where the sound came from. Because inside the room, you have no, like I said, common frame of reference to know where this muffled sound. But I remember that moment of her singing to me. And it was before I could even really move well. I was definitely just a few months old. And watching her mouth and trying to reach my hand up to touch her mouth. But the coordination was off, and she held my hand to her mouth. And knowing the music was a huge draw from day one. And set out about learning to play instruments as early as I could. I didn't have anyone to teach me, so spent most of my life teaching myself to play and teaching myself to understand. But little did I know that the laws, like Pythagoras said, a rock is nothing but prose of music. The laws of the entire universe is locked and readily open for anyone who's willing to understand or attempt to understand the musical application.
Yeah, it is amazing about many people who come to Russell's science and philosophy, the ones who really get it in terms of a greater understanding happen to be musicians in many cases, which I find pretty interesting. So what instruments do you play and did you learn to play over the years?
I mean, my best instrument to date is still guitar. I'm pretty proficient at the piano. The cello I've played, the violin, I play with a saxophone. I play at my trumpet. I'm still messing around with my clarinet. But I mean, if you can play one instrument and you know the relationships between the notes, once you define those relationships between the other stimuli for other notes, on other instruments, if you play one instrument, you really do play them all. You just have to have the time to practice and find the corresponding relationships. But my music took a major turn once I began to understand, that C over C sharp was phosphorus, and and F over F sharp was chartreuse, but it was the color of oxygen at the same time, and you can create your own synesthetic chart based on those things.
That's very cool. What's one of the greatest things you've taken away from reading the work of Walter Russell, as far as perhaps one thing that sticks with you when you think about the work he's done, as far as something that's illumined you personally?
Well, the altruistic nature by which he wrote, and recognizing that he had no choice in the matter. When you're shown a great light, if you don't reflect it away and reflect it to others, you'll be consumed by it. You have to reflect and refract it out and share that great light. And him and his relationship with Leo, they're shining examples of love and the best that humanity can offer.
Well, I certainly agree with that assessment, and that's one of the things they did so well was demonstrated the extraordinary power of man-woman balance, in the sense that everything they did together as one, something we can certainly learn from. Now, concerning illumination, are there any personal experiences that you'd like to share of your own?
I mean, beyond always walking in the light in my own way, and quiet times, things that they would call you crazy for, but you hear the sounds and the nature, the voice of nature speak to you from within when you begin to see relationships and saw the common factor in all things, and just looking and examining cavitation, where there was nothing that was kept apart from me, and it was all decipherable. The dreams that I had from infancy up until, my early 20s, like the dream that I had at 16, and walking through the nature of the universe, leaving, taking off in my dream and deciding to fly to the edge of the sun to watch the production of hydrogen, as I knew even at that age, in watching it, I could tell that hydrogen didn't come from the sun, and it wasn't made in the sun. It was the interaction of that plasma with the dark matter of space right there, like foam forming on the edge of water of a shore, where the water meets the shore. That foam, being matter forming. So it was consciousness, in an unconscious state
Mm-hmm.
that I've always been a part of. And therefore, when I would read about Walter's illumination, to be able to go into an illuminate site for 39 days without stopping, having everything revealed to you, it's huge, but to have your, every night you go to sleep, to be welcomed into this whole new world that I express in the sculptures that I create. I feel I was as equally blessed with sight and insight because the things that I've created.
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing. I'm quite amazed at what the gift that's been handed to me.
Mm-hmm.
Because I know that I could not have created these things myself, or maybe I did in a higher consciousness, in a larger scope from this whole link of a chain of events called life and humanity, But I've always had a guide explaining things to me through these dreams. Now, filed 53 patents, most of them scientists, with scientific applications to them. That's life-changing. Life-changing.
That's very interesting. How would you say that, learning the work of Walter Russell, would you say that it has affected your professional life? And if so, how?
Well, you learn that mankind's biggest fear is fear of dying. Fear of death. Most of the things we do we do as a result of that fear that we are going to die.
Mm-hmm.
We ask for more than what we need, feeling there's going to be a loss. We attach so many things to these things that we don't need, thinking that it's going to keep us alive, and coming to realize that there is no death. There's just a refolding and an unfolding, and there is no real state of unconsciousness. You pass from one state just into another state. And you may have to reboot and start all over again, but it's okay as far as if going through those noble gases.
Okay, I guess I'd just like to ask you one more question, and that is several people in the University of Science and Philosophy, Michael Hudak being one, is a fan of your show. I haven't actually got to watch it yet, but he does mention to me that the Universal One is in the show, and it's something you take with you onto the set, off the set. And I'm just curious, how does the cast and crew respond when they encounter the Universal One by Walter Russell?
Anyone that takes a look at it, and the whole set is filled with artists, whether they're thespians or photography,
mm-hmm.
Or directors. They're all artists, and they're all looking for relationships and the understanding of relationships. So they see the book, and it looks like some old textbook from a bygone era. And they open it up, and they see, the universal clock in there, or universal mathematics, or take a look and watch the periodic table unfold.
Mm-hmm.
And look at the relationship between the table and the colors. They know that it's a greater science and a much deeper understanding than what we've been taught in school. And then all of them, anyone that's partially awake, becomes conscious and looking at it. And, have ordered books. They've ordered from wrong places. They know that they needed to. It's easier to go to the university's website and get the books, but they've all ordered books. And, since my character is going through dying from ALS, him seeking a spiritual route or a solution that may not have been unfolded by the arm of science. that's being used or practiced today.
Mm-hmm.
There's room and space for it.
Well, that's excellent. Just want to say I appreciate you taking the time to come on with us and as our first guest for our new series called INNERVIEWS, INNER Views. I just want to say thank you so much and good luck in the future and with the series. And I hope you continue to break records and do all the things that make you a happy man. And good luck on your coming child as well. Congratulations.
Well, thank you for that, Matt.
You're most welcome.
And I appreciate the school and the university for all of its help in helping everyone awaken to the potential that lies in humanity, because our very existence is reliant upon that. And from observing the world at present, I don't know if we're going to make it as a race unless a lot more of us become more conscious and a few more Leos and Walters are born or come forth in this world and help spearhead this work towards consciousness.
Well, you're certainly doing your part to help out, and we here at the university appreciate your efforts, and I'm sure many Russell students and alumni do as well. Thanks again, Terrence.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Well, folks, that wraps up our first installment of Interviews, brought to you by the University of Science and Philosophy. We appreciate you tuning in. Spread the word about the university. Let some people know about Walter and Lau Russell and the incredible work that they've done for the uplift of all humanity. Visit us on the web, philosophy.org. That's philosophy.org. You can call us at 1-800-882-LOVE, 1-800-882-LOVE, 5683. Also on the website, philosophy.org, you may see the links to the official YouTube page, the official Facebook, and the official Twitter, on which, if you would like to stay informed with announcements, please follow us. We appreciate you taking the time to listen. As always, have the most blessed of days and keep seeking the light. My name's Matt Presti, and I'll see you on the other side of the wave.